Hey everybody, I've got Yotam Ben Ezra. He's the CPO, the Chief Product Officer at a company called Dig Security. And we're going to dig into this a little bit more. So, Yotam, how's it going, first of all?
It's going great and great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's paint the big picture here first, Yotam. So, you know, your background, I believe, I'm not quite sure, but how did you guys get to where you are today?
Yeah, so we are we all of us from the founder standpoint and from my standpoint personally, we've been in security for several years, and talking to security teams and CISOs, we kept hearing the same questions. So the first one was, what data do we even own in our cloud environment?
Mhm.
How is that data being used? And then how it's moving across the organization, who is actually consuming our data? And then how do we protect it from things like data misuse, compliance breaches, data exfiltration? Now, for start, it's a super important problem because data is always the target of attackers. The eventuality of things is that this is how attackers monetize their activities. And at the same time, we've had for years and years in security various solutions to protect our networks and to protect our endpoints like NDRs and EDRs, but never dedicated data security solutions such as DDR. And so this is the kind of the reason that brought us together to solve this amazing problem. I think there is also an opportunity to solve it today with cloud technologies, which enables to make data security easy.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, you know, it's all about the data, right? And how do you protect that? And I believe you guys are really digging into a specific part of that data as well, that the images and so on. I mean, these days, of course, you know, we're digitizing everything, right? Your passports, your licenses, your documents, and so on. And on those documents is a lot of other information, not just your photograph, right? Tell us a bit about how images are becoming part of the data bank and the
Yeah,
risks.
so to start, the adoption of cloud has caused an explosion of data for organizations, right?
Right.
Everyone is utilizing multiple clouds, so we've doubled, tripled, quadrupled the amount of variety of data services that we're using. And that's kind of across PaaS services, IaaS services, and then databases as a service. What happens is the average enterprise has at least 35 different data services across thousands of instances where they are storing data. And that's why it's so hard to deal with and sort of figure out those questions I mentioned. Now, what happened well, I think there is a lot of advancement towards enabling remote services. And I think that COVID was something that kind of accelerated a lot of that as part of, people sitting at home and trying to essentially keep living their lives from their computer. And so a lot of service providers are essentially enabling the ability to authenticate or to identify people utilizing pictures of their IDs and their
Mm.
license registrations or their passports and so on. And they end up storing loads and loads of personal information on images. And so at Dig, we decided to tackle that, and then essentially using optical character recognition, we are able to classify and identify where do we have sensitive data which resides on images and might risk compliance fines or security breaches or essentially be leaked based on those images.
What are you finding right now when you look at you know, you dig into the image data bank, right, of these companies? What are some of the stuff you're finding that you probably should not be finding?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, we find loads of types of data in general in organizations. So several categories there which are super important. So first one is payment information.
Mm.
So things like credit card numbers, debit card numbers, financial data, SWIFT codes, IBANs, and so on, which is super important to organizations. On top of that, medical information. So medical records, patient IDs, and that type of information implies a certain type of compliance that the service provider didn't necessarily think about. So one example on payment, actually, we were working with one of our customers, and the CISO was under the assumption that they are not holding credit cards. And under that assumption, it means they don't need to comply with certain parts of
Mhm.
regulations, right? The CISO came in and told us, our team told me that we are not storing any credit cards, so we're good. We don't need to be PCI compliant. And we start looking at the environment, and lo and behold, there is thousands of credit cards in the environment. So that was kind of an eureka moment where you kind of need to very quickly clean up what you didn't think you had. The story behind it, by the way, was an error in some logging application, which was accidentally logging those credit cards into a database as part of an error log. And so every few lines of the database included the credit cards. And so this is kind of an interesting story. On the images side, I'll say that it's mostly around those type of processes where, you know, we have an interface for our customers to upload an ID, like for many financial services, mostly, you will have to upload your ID to be verified as part of registration to a service or something of that nature. And those IDs are sometimes stored in the thousands. Now, once you start evaluating whether they are stored in the right place and whether the configuration around that storage, things like encryption, logging, access, who has access to it, and so on and so on, then you find a lot of things that in many cases need fixing.
It's a big problem. I mean, you know, traditional data, right? Just stuff that's in documents and files. You could scan it. You could kind of see generally what type of sensitivity the data is, right? But when it's images, it's kind of hard because you need some kind of an OCR with it, right? How does that play into it?
Yeah, so OCR is a technology which essentially is able to extract the text from images, and then you are able to scan it as if it was text. So we are simply utilizing that technology across the analysis that we do across all the data stores in an organization. Every time we find either an image file or a PDF file with an image or anything essentially which is a format as an image, we apply that technology in order to extract all the text that exists in that image and then run similar algorithms to the classification algorithms that we have. And that enables us to find this data. The challenge with it is that in many cases it's overlooked because it's not trivial and not many technologies support that. And so in many cases, you know, the problem is so big that people say, okay, let's deal with what we know first and then get to that. But when you have an automated platform which enables you to do all of those in a very easy way, you sometimes find things on those images that you want to address sooner.
It's quite interesting because it's a kind of you've got the documents in there that's kind of complex to really, you know, unless you visually look at them, right? And who's going to do that, right? And so with your OCR, I'm assuming it just takes all the data and it scans it and then just gives you red flags that says, hey, wait a minute, you've got some pretty sensitive information here. Maybe it's credit card information and whatever. And then from there, it allows them to categorize the data. Is that roughly right?
Yeah, definitely that. So organizations which are storing sensitive information or personally identifiable information are subject to several regulations today. Each of the countries across the world is legislating around privacy these days. Every country in the US is kind of bringing laws which are to do with privacy and what you have to comply with if you're storing private information. And it's happening the same across the globe. So in Brazil, in India, all across Europe, the EU, of course, with GDPR, and then Australia and so on. And the idea is, as an organization, to identify where we are storing personal information and to make sure that the places where we are storing this information actually comply with those regulations. So, for example, you're not allowed to store private information of European citizen outside of Europe. So if you have that data in a cloud environment in the US, it's an issue. You are subject to fines. So the ability to essentially pick up on those things and fix them in time is crucial. And the sums, there are some of, I don't want to say sums, but there are some news have been last year about the amount of fines that were paid by, you know, some of the big 5 companies across GDPR in the last couple of years. The risk there is real, and it's significant from a financial perspective.
Yeah, we're just warming up now, man. It's like you got to get used to it slowly. But it definitely everybody's got to protect that data because if you can't protect that, then what are we protecting, right? What's the future of Dick Security? Where you guys are headed?
So I think three areas. The first one is being wherever data lives. So currently we've started with solving the biggest problem out there, which is the public cloud problem, where I think around 80% of the data resides today already. But for a modern enterprise, there are more places where data is. So different
Got to
types
dig
of
into it.
services and so on. So we're going to get there to all of those. I think the second part is around security. So security throughout the life cycle. So one example is that today we are already able to protect data in real time. So if we found that data, we've mapped all of that out, and we now know that we are holding it in a way which is satisfactory from a posture standpoint. We are still having to give access to that data to a lot of people and processes and partners and developers. And so what happens if one of those legitimate users accidentally makes a mistake and takes sensitive data outside of the organization? So we're able to detect that. And of course, all of those capabilities are things which are taking us forward. One of the things that we've recently been working on is Gen AI and LLM security. So you are obviously aware of the big excitement around the generative AI models. And what the result of this for enterprise and organizations is that a lot of them are experimenting today with how they are going to utilize those amazing capabilities, and are essentially enabling and building LLM models inside their production environment, training them on their data. So now we have data which is not trivially saved because it's in the model, but it cannot be taken out of the model. And it has been shown that there are several attack techniques which enable extracting that data by engineering the prompt of that engine or by doing several things there. And so the capability to understand what type of data was used in order to train a model, and the ability to understand who has access to this model and can potentially reach that data is really important for organizations which are building that capability these days. And so this is kind of another thing we're working on. And then lastly, I think one of the guiding principles for us is that data security historically has always been pretty hard. It's a complex and very wide and broad and deep space at the same time. And so our mission is to make it easy and to essentially make it a little bit effortless and do the heavy lifting for our customers.
Well, Yotam, congratulations getting this far and continued stuff to get this thing done because the channel, the whole industry needs it. And the channel community that we serve, I mean, they're always looking to find ways to help, their customers obviously solve these problems. And the challenge for them is that there's so much noise in the market. A lot of people talk about data protection. A lot of people talk about these things, but how is it being done? To what degree it's being done? And as you cleverly, pointed out, now here we go. We're taking data and we're putting it into, things like ChatGPT, which is now a new data lake being formed. God knows where that's going, right? And people are exchanging that data. So it is a moving target, isn't it? And you got to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll say that we are a very channel-focused organization. So we have a specific channel team with several enablement programs worked on there, both in the US and also in the rest of the world. We are working closely with our channels and providing them with all the guidance and the capabilities that we are able to onboard. And yeah, I mean, that's a major focus.
Well, Yotam, I'll leave you with the last word. What do you want all the channel partners out there to know about Dick Security, and how is the best way for them to find your website?
Yeah, so I think As I said, we are very open and are working together with various channel partners across the globe, and have onboarded several important programs for enabling the channel. And find us at dig.security. Super
Good
easy.
stuff. All right, everybody. So out there, obviously, protecting your data is that the number one goal, right? And there's a lot of layers of data that's out there, and imaging and so on. And looks like these folks have got a good angle on it. So check it all out. Let me know how it goes. Yotam, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, and have a great day, and keep us posted.
Same here. Appreciate the time. Thank you, Julian.